Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kaylin McKittrick. I'm the Director of Marketing and Engagement for Executive Education here at the Neeley School of Business. We are so proud to partner with the Alumni Relations Group to bring you these events, and we are thrilled that you are here today. As many of you already know, the mission and objectives for these events is to bring you innovative thoughts from our faculty and business leaders across industries. And I know that we're going to do that for you today. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Northern Trust and Jeff King, for making these events possible. And I just have two housekeeping items today. We will be recording this event, so you'll be able to access it later on the Alumni Advantage website or the Executive Education website. And if you have any questions for our panelists today, please feel free to put those in the chat directed towards Tracy Larison. You might be wondering who Tracy is. Tracy is our newly named Director of Recruiting and Admissions for Executive MBA and Working Professionals graduate programs. We wanted to introduce you all to Tracy in case any of you had interest in an Executive MBA for yourself and your personal growth, or to grow and retain talent within your organization. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it along to Tracy, who's going to introduce our topic and our panelists today. Hi, Tracy.
Thanks, Kaylin. Excited to be with you all today. Today's discussion is, of course, a perfect fit for us at Neeley. Across all of our programs, especially for working professionals, we invest a great deal of time and resources around the topic of leadership, particularly now in such times of accelerated change. As an example, the Executive MBA program curriculum focuses on developing those high-level strategic and agile leaders who want to make a bigger impact in their company or industry, which is a great segue to today's topic, leadership lessons learned from Undercover Boss. I'm so excited to have two true leaders of industry to introduce to you today. The first is Sharon Leite, CEO of the Vitamin Shoppe and member of the Neeley Board of Advisors. In her role as CEO, Sharon leads a renewed growth strategy that is bringing industry-leading innovation, quality, and expertise to the health and wellness category. Ms. Leite joined the Vitamin Shoppe in August 2018, and since that time has launched a new technology-driven retail format, opened distribution to new sales channels, increased development and penetration of private brands, introduced personalization initiatives, pioneered an expansive CBD hemp extract merchandising program, and also expanded the business into Asia. Sharon, we're so glad to have you with us today.
Great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Our next guest is Laurent Therivel, known to many as LT, President and CEO of US Cellular. LT joined US Cellular as President and CEO in July 2020, bringing 15 years of experience in the wireless industry, including more than 10 years in senior executive roles at AT&T. As CEO, he is focused on growing US Cellular's business and positioning the company for future success, building on US Cellular's mission of connecting customers to the people and places that matter most to them. LT serves on the board of directors of both TDS, US Cellular's parent company, and US Cellular. Thank you, LT, for joining us today.
Thanks so much. It's great to be with you guys.
Our discussion today is going to be moderated by Dean Daniel Pullin. Dean Pullin is the John V. Roach Dean of the Neeley School of Business here at TCU and also Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. Dean Pullin joined the Neeley School about 3 years ago from the University of Oklahoma, where he served as the Dean at the Price College of Business. Prior to joining OU, Dean Pullin worked for global consultancy McKinsey & Company and the private equity firm Hicks Muse Tate & First and its portfolio companies. Dean Pullin is our visionary leader, currently leading us in the development of an ambitious 5-year strategic plan, focusing on innovation, leadership, and whole student development. Under his leadership, the Neeley School has been ranked top 20 of undergraduate programs in the US, #1 executive MBA, #1 energy MBA, and #4 full-time MBA in Texas. And of course, one of the top 10 business schools to watch across the US. So welcome to our guests and Dean Pullin. I'm going to let you take the conversation from here.
All right. Well, thank you, Tracy, and once again, welcome to the Neeley family. We're really excited to have you, and really appreciate all you do. And I've been looking forward to this conversation for a couple of months now, since I was able. The Undercover Boss is kind of a big thing in the Pullin household. We record every episode, and how lucky was I to see two people that have both been important parts of the various chapters of my career journey be featured in the same season. And so both Sharon and LT, thank you so much for investing your time. I know you're obviously running very successful companies. It's a busy moment. We're still in this transition period as we hopefully are emerging from COVID, and I think the insights you'll bring to the Neeley community will be outstanding. And so let's just start with kind of where you are. You're CEOs, you're running great companies, you got a million things going on, a lot of different opportunities. What was it about the Undercover Boss vehicle that drew you to want to participate, or how does that work?
So maybe I'll take a crack at it. So for me, and Tracy mentioned when I joined, right? So I started in July of 2020, and July of 2020 is sort of a couple months after all of us realized this pandemic was a thing, and it was a dream job for me. I've been in telecom my whole life. This is what I wanted to do, and it was certainly not dream circumstances in which to take over a company. And the hardest part of the pandemic, at least for me, has been the lack of personal engagement, personal presence, being able to be there. In every job I've ever taken over, and I imagine Sharon is quite similar, being present is really important. And all of a sudden, you weren't able to be present. And if you've had a lot of time at your company, maybe that's okay. But for a brand new CEO, not being present was really difficult. And so this gave me this fantastic vehicle, one, to learn about the business and to learn about the culture in a very personal and kind of interesting way. But then also it gave a fantastic opportunity to really multiply presence in the sense of the company could see me being there, rolling up my sleeves, getting into the operations, and do so in a way that was really multiplicative. And so it was especially as a new CEO, that ability to get presence quickly made participating in the show a no-brainer. Not to mention, the marketing benefits of brand awareness and brand consideration, but those are a bit more obvious. So at least for me, that was a big driver.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and for me, it was somewhat similar. I had been involved in a turnaround of the organization, and we had done a lot of really great work for the organization, and things hadn't really been moving along quite well. And for us, it was really to be able to share the story of our health enthusiasts and how incredibly wonderful they are in the organization, and what a big part they are of the success of our organization. So while there's no question that there were operational things that we found that, some I kind of might have known a little bit of before, but some were a surprise, it really was the stories of the people that make up the organization was such a huge benefit that I thought for us and for the organization. And I have to say, what was one of the outcomes of it that was really pretty incredible was the pride that came from our people, and the fact that we were selected to be on the show and that they could showcase their gifts to the customers that we serve and to the communities that we serve.
Yeah, well, I want to go ahead, LT.
Yeah, I just to build on that a bit. First of all, if you guys can see the picture on the screen, they made Sharon look way better than me. So I mean, the disguise was jarring to go through, but yeah, Sharon definitely got the better end of that, the better end of that deal. Just to touch on something she mentioned, I underestimated the positive cultural impact that the show would have. The CEO is the story arc that holds the show together, but the stars of the show are really the associates that participate. And so they really let the culture shine through, and they did it for US Cellular. And obviously I watched Sharon's show as well, and they certainly did it for Vitamin Shoppe as well. And so it really highlighted and created pride inside the organization around the culture. And I probably didn't fully understand that until after it aired.
Yeah. And I've got to think that that's probably important, in any time, but maybe especially, in our time, right? We're in the midst of the great, resignation. I read a stat last week that said a full 50% of American workers are at least contemplating, a career shift right now. And so to engender that type of pride, and hopefully that can be translated into loyalty and retention, it's probably the right move at the right time, right?
Yeah, I also think, just so you guys have a little bit of the logistics, and I'm assuming this is for LT as well, is that, the show aired this year, but it was actually shot last year. And so it was kind of in production / in the editing cycle with the network for almost a full year. So, I do want to say that COVID protocols that we followed were incredibly strict. I mean, because we were dealing with all of the logistics of what we were going through at the time as well. And for me, what was so important was, we went through a tremendous amount when the pandemic hit, and there were so many changes that were happening. And when you run an organization, a global organization, you're dealing with all the different protocols, state to state, different countries and things of that nature. Our people also went through just such tremendous challenges. And with the pandemic, they were all impacted by the pandemic in very unique ways. I think, we have all dealt with how the pandemic has impacted. What happened in Texas is not what maybe people were dealing with in other parts of the country, especially really large cities. And so just really being able to learn and understand while we were doing the show, we had all of those things going on as well. So did want to make sure the audience knew that this was really in the height of the pandemic. And so it was really extraordinary for the people that we got to interact with during that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my timing, the timing was identical for me. So, I mean, they approached us in October of 2020, right? And it didn't air until, for me, April, or March, of 22. So it was quite an extended time frame. Daniel, I want to touch on what you talked about around the Great Resignation and the importance of corporate pride and just pride in where you are and what you do. I'm a firm believer that when you exit a company, it's kind of a two-step process. And people usually focus on the second step, which is, where am I going to go? And as someone who's thinking about leaving, where am I going to go and how do I compare the pros and the cons? And a company thinks about, well, where people are going to go and how do we have competitive packages and competitive benefits and this and that. And what they don't focus on is the first step, which is, are you emotionally ready to leave a company? And I think that's actually a fairly significant step. And ideally, as a business, you can tackle attrition in that first step, where your associates don't even think about leaving, right? Because they say, I love this place. I enjoy working here. I'm with my brothers and sisters. I'm with my family. Why would I consider going somewhere else? And culture can play a huge role in that. A lot of times when it gets to that second step, and you're saying, well, hey, hang on, you could have this role or you can have this comp package, it's almost too late. And so if the show can help highlight what a special place Vitamin Shoppe is to work, or what a special place US Cellular is to work, well, then you can address that first step, and a lot of times you're getting ahead of it.
Yeah, and actually, I want to address even just the basic statistics of that. There was actually, of course, Daniel, with your background with McKinsey, there was a recent McKinsey study just that said that the majority of the people in the Great Resignation is really, it's not, well, what gets publicized is the comp. They've really left before it gets to the comp. And so I couldn't agree. It's don't give them even the option that want to even take the phone call. If they love what they're doing and they love the people that they're doing it with, and they're passionate about whatever mission or whatever goal they're working towards, that becomes a secondary aspect of it all. And I think that sometimes as leaders, we get so caught up in the mechanics that, the engagement part, which is always a little bit of the softer stuff, but it is the stuff that means the most.
Yeah. Well, I know we've been talking about, this concept in terms of retention. But I've got to think for both of your companies as you look ahead. I mean, the awareness, but also sort of the human dimension that you've brought to what each of your companies stand for, may help you on the recruiting trail, particularly with Gen Zs and millennials who are so purpose driven and want to make meaning, in the workplace, because it's, the biggest chunk of anybody's time pretty much is what they spend at the office, wherever the office is anymore. And, when people have options, they're looking for more than just the paycheck, I would assume.
Yeah.
Certainly, we talk a great deal about our mission, and our mission's around connecting people to the people and the places that matter most to them. We're proud about connecting people, and we're proud that in our case, briefly on US Cellular, we're the fourth largest wireless company in the US, but the first three are a little bit bigger than we are in T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon. And we're a regional player. We cover 21 states. But we focus a lot of times on places where other people aren't. So we cover a lot more rural areas. We invest in network and in jobs in places where people aren't. And our people are proud of that. And we really emphasize that in our mission. And we certainly emphasize that in the show as well. And to your point, Daniel, around recruiting, we actually send people a link to the show when they apply for application at US Cellular, because we kind of use it as a, hey, want to know what it's like to work here sort of thing. And so, yeah, we use it as a recruiting tool just as much as attrition. Retention.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great proof point for, what they might be endeavoring to do. So, well, let's talk a little bit about a word that Sharon used earlier, which was surprise. Whether it was, we talked about the cultural surprise to the upside. We talked a little bit about brand and sort of awareness benefits, but what about like strategically or operationally? What was for each of you, and maybe we'll start with LT on this one. What was the kind of the biggest aha moment about your company that came from your experience?
So I'll touch on two. A big one for me was how proud people really were of the culture. I've worked in a lot of different companies, and every company says, oh, we have a strong culture. And, until you're somewhere that really does, you don't know what it means. And so how much each of the employees and each of the people that I worked with really lived the culture and were proud of it. And just to tie it back a little bit to the show, just so everybody knows, because we get a lot of questions about, well, why, what explanation do you have around why cameras are following you around, for example? And so for us, the show that they think they're participating in is a show called Starting Over, where I'm a out of work bartender from San Diego, which unfortunately is something I've done. I'm restarting my career, and I'm considering US Cellular as well as a couple of other companies for employment, and I'm going to shadow people and do a bunch of different jobs. And so that explains why we have cameras following us around. And they're not encouraged to, promote the company or to talk about what a great place it is. They're told, look, this guy's just going to follow you around. And they were consistently emphasizing to me just what a great place it was. And, I really should consider it. And I really hope you come join us. And so that really shone through. And, much more so than maybe any of the individual operational issues. I've been in telecom for a long time, and so most of the stuff that we found, I was at least fairly familiar with. But the cultural pride, which I was super excited as a new CEO to see that was certainly an aha for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what most people don't realize is that the show really is an extemporaneous experience. There's no script. There's no, the producers know kind of what they're planning to do, but same thing for the associates that we all met. They didn't really know. So same premise, I'm starting over. I'm this kind of hippy dippy kind of gal, Marie from Cleveland, Ohio, who's trying to figure out what she wants to do. And she loves health and wellness. And so let's figure this out, what she wants to do. And so I would say that every single associate that I came into contact with was so proud to be part of the Vitamin Shoppe, even with its flaws, whether it was the register that went down or the jumbled mess shipment that came through. My favorite one that truly was a surprise was Bogus Bopus. That was like, oh, that's an interesting way to get inventory. not the way we want you to do it, but okay, nevertheless, your heart is in the right place. So, and, I got to, ride a forklift and do a cherry picker and, all those kinds of things that I never would get to do. But what's so important about the show is the unfiltered view you get as a CEO to be able to really see your people at a different level. And so as I think about how I lead and the importance of what I learned as part of the show, it was really understanding that our people all have their own story. So while they come to work with their game face on and what they want to deliver for the consumer or for the customer or whatever their job is, there's another story. And I think as leaders, and one of the things that came out of our show that I'm really proud of is the Vitamin Shoppe Cares Foundation. And the Vitamin Shoppe Cares Foundation is the foundation that we provide for our associates who are going through hardship. And so that was really special for it to come out of the show, and really understanding that the people that we work with every day have another layer. And our job is to kind of understand what that layer is. And while we will never get to necessarily know every single person in our organization, creating a culture that leads with empathy, that you can get a chance to understand, and that you can put guardrails or policies or procedures to give people the flexibility that they may need, or somebody for them to talk to, I think is a really important of really, building the foundation of a business. Because at the end of the day, when you think of how you run a company, it is about the people that deliver those results. Yes, there's manufacturing and there's all kinds of things that we've mechanized things or technology and things, but there's still people. And I think that was probably the biggest takeaway for me that came out of the show, and how special our people were. And I would echo the same thing that LT said, is that I always knew it was special, but I learned that it was another meaning of specialness there, and the connection that our associates had to the communities that we serve.
If I could, just to touch on one other thing on this, I think it's incredibly well said, Sharon. The hardest thing for me during the show, and Sharon, I don't know if this was this way for you, but if for those of you that have watched the show, and hopefully most of you have, there's this moment where you finish shadowing the employee and you sit down with them and you get to know them a little bit better. And what it looks like on TV is we sit down and we say, hey, so thanks for letting me shadow you. Tell me a bit about yourself. And all of a sudden they're just spitting out their life story and all the troubles and tribulations. And you know what? I can't pay my mortgage and all these kinds of things. In reality, that is an hour and a half conversation at times. And it's simply edited to be much, much shorter. And by far the hardest challenge for me personally was engaging in that conversation. I know they give you a bit of a briefing on the person and kind of what challenges they've had. And so I kind of know a little bit about what I'm trying to pull out. But you're trying to pull these details out, and people are sharing these details with someone that they think is also down on their luck. Mm-hmm. And so there's a sympathy and empathy there. And you have to listen and absorb while you are essentially lying to these people about who you are and what you're talking to them for. And that was really emotionally difficult. There was 4 nights after those conversations that I had. And each one of those nights, I had to go back to the hotel and say, you know what, I need some time. Those were by far the hardest days, because you're hearing about these other layers of folks that are as challenging, and particularly in the pandemic, where some of these personal challenges have been exacerbated. And a lot of times as CEOs, we don't get that personal view of everybody on our team, but they're sharing it again under really weird pretenses. Mm-hmm. And that was hard. Obviously, it becomes okay in the reveal when you can share who you are and share why you're doing it. But I found that really emotionally difficult.
Yeah, especially when you think about where we were coming from in the pandemic, where we've been operating our businesses in this medium. So keep in mind that, again, based on when we were shooting the show, we had predominantly been remote. Now, while I tried to get out into the stores and but I hadn't been to our distribution center in a year. And so just the whole idea of, oh my gosh, we're with real people. Because let me just tell you, we had some serious COVID protocols on the show. That's all I can say. So when you see us without masks, it's because we were all in this little production bubble. And so it was also, so some of it was also about the fact that I was just so happy to be with people because I hadn't been with people in a long time. So that was another part of the show that was just, it was really very special. And I got to tell you, the network and just the whole production, they were just a truly first class. They really cared about the people. They did a tremendous amount of, they were good people themselves in terms of finding the right people and to showcase our organizations in the very best light possible.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, Sharon. The biggest concern we had was that somehow the show would exploit our associates in some kind of negative way. And it couldn't have been further from that. They were incredibly respectful. There were things that you didn't see on the show that they could have used and they didn't use because they were concerned about some of the impact it might have had. And so it was really done very professionally, different from other shows that I've seen where, if you're participating, it's fair game on your personal life. I thought they managed it incredibly well.
Yeah. So what is it, to the extent you can share, so what's kind of the rest of the story for those associates whose lives were positively impacted? Kind of where are they now, kind of a question.
Well, for ours, all four of them. So Glow, who was the woman that had an incredible product knowledge that we could all learn from. She's actually getting her nutritionist license, and she's going to be a registered nutritionist. And so she's continuing to work on that. We had a little bit of a reunion just recently. For the first time, I had my entire organization together, every store manager, most of the people from our corporate office here actually in Dallas at the Gaylord. And they all actually got a chance to meet one another because they didn't know who they were either. So they didn't know who the other people were. They didn't know who they were in other parts of the company. And so they got to finally meet one another here about 30 days ago. So each one of them has gone on their journey. I'm really proud to say that all four of them are thriving. They all have new or enhanced roles, which also was a lesson, I think, for me about making sure that when I look at internal talent, that we take chances on people. So if we see that people have an aptitude to do something, and maybe like Suzanne, who was the woman that helped me learn how to flip a tire, and Suzanne is now in our distribution center and she's thriving. So she got out of the store. She was able to take all that great knowledge from what she learned from the customer and from the store. And now she's impacting hundreds of stores and thousands of customers at a level that she never would have done if she had stayed in Richmond, Virginia. And so that's a testimony to what we as leaders, when we're talking about retaining talent, developing talent, making sure our organizations are set up for success, to grow and thrive, that we really institutionalize what that really means so that we can take advantage of the talent that currently exists in our own organizations.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Sharon. Similarly, so of our three, two of them have been promoted. Marco was our prepaid store manager. He's now running a series of agent stores for us. Alina recently got promoted into an agent relationship manager job, so she's doing a bigger role. I'll focus on what Sharon talked about. When you run organizations like both of us run that have a significant, call it field component to it, whether it be, for me, I have two significant components like this in the sense of our distribution, our stores, our field employees. But then we also have our network field employees. The risk you can run sometimes is that you draw this artificial line between headquarters and field, and that certain employees think of themselves as, well, I'm a field employee, and others think of themselves as headquarters employees. And if you're not careful, this distinction can be self-perpetuating, and you have to put mechanisms in place to force headquarters employees to spend time in the field, whether it's the sales leaders, whether it's as care leaders. And you have to create mechanisms to elevate people or to give people tours, kind of let's call it, from the field into headquarters. And left to its own devices, that won't occur. And so as a CEO, you have to be purposeful around creating those rotations, both from a process perspective, but also from a culture perspective. I've always done that, but certainly Alina to me was the best example of someone that was just this incredibly talented store associate that has had so much to give. And were it not for the show, I don't think she would be have the same profile, be contributing as much as she had. And it's forcing us to be even more deliberate and more precise about creating some of those rotations. And on the flip side, creating opportunities for people at headquarters to go get out in the field. A field tour should be a prerequisite for certain executive positions, and we can forget that sometimes.
Yeah, and I agree with you, LT. I think the other thing that's really important that we focus on too is also just to make sure that with the pandemic and with remote work, where it also historically had been, there was the New York, New Jersey contingent that was our customer care center, and then there was everybody else in our distribution centers, our distribution networks across the country. That now with what the pandemic taught us is that now I've got this pool of talent across the United States, across the globe. And so we've been leveraging that as well. And so where if you were to look at a map and you take our support center team and you would just look at where do all of those people live, you would see them in Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey primarily. Now we look at a map and now they're sprinkled. There's still majority of them are in the tri-state area, but you see them now sprinkled throughout the United States because we've learned that we have jobs that are corporate jobs that you can do them from Ohio or Texas or California. And that is another, I think, kind of silver lining out of this experience as well.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I want to go back to a word you used earlier, Sharon, extemporaneous, right? You mentioned that the show was extemporaneous, and certainly over the last couple of years, and maybe always, leadership can be a very extemporaneous exercise, without a fixed script. And leadership responses have been uneven, across corporate America, but both of your companies have continued to thrive. And with the Undercover Boss experience, you've emerged either sort of punctuating an incoming belief or doubling down your belief that really the true asset of your organization is the human, it is the team, it is the culture against which they operate. And with business and society going through a digital transformation with so much disruption, you've got to keep that asset sharp and current and relevant. So what's your philosophy or approach to really investing in your personnel as lifelong learners and to make sure that they have the skills, not just the will, but the skill to be successful given your growth trajectories?
So why don't maybe I'll go first. I'll talk on the extemporaneous part first, just briefly. It was, Sharon's right? It's not scripted. There's a moment in my episode where I'm doing work at the top of a tower, and if you look carefully, I've got a watch cap on when I get to the top, but I didn't at the bottom, and that's because we got to the top and the wind was blowing so bad that my wig almost flew off. And so, I kind of had to go like this and like fake itch my head and kind of, hey, makeup person. And so we're putting hats on, and there was a fair amount of moments like that. I will briefly connect the dots then too, from an extemporaneous perspective. I think that leadership during the pandemic, you have had to be so much more extemporaneous, so much more flexible, so much more humble than maybe you had to be in the past. And, I'll reference my room here, right? This is the office in my house. And this is where I do the vast majority of our town halls from. When I joined the company, I would do a video every week. And most of it was on business topics, but we would always end with, them asking me some funny question about myself. And, you've had to be, I believe, much more present, much more of a human. And I think you've also had to be much more humble than maybe in the past. And I'll use examples like Sharon and I have probably had to make a whole bunch of decisions around, do we or do we not put vaccine mandates in place? Do you put mask mandates in place? When do you return to the office? How do we return to the office? And the simple answer is we don't have the answers. We don't know. We are trying to adjust with the times like everybody else is, but that's not traditionally what the role of the CEO was. Traditionally, the role of the CEO is you have the answers. And if you don't have the answers, you don't put yourself out there. And I at least have been very transparent with our organization that I don't have all the answers. And we're going to have to kind of roll with this thing and co-create this a little bit together. And people give a lot of grace when you are humble and when you are open and when you are flexible about that. And so I would also say, kind of getting to the heart of your question, Daniel, from investing in people, I think the first thing is you have to be very, very flexible in what people want. And I think the pandemic has caused people to evaluate their career and their career paths and their career journeys in a way that's very different than the past, right? In the past, the company could essentially say, here are the steps that you need to take to progress inside of our company, right? You have to do this job and that job, and maybe you have to get a degree, and maybe you have to get an advanced degree. And there was this path that you followed. And I spent 12 years at AT&T, and there was a very defined path that everyone was sort of expected to follow. And that came with formal steps that were well known, and it came with informal steps that were more tribal in nature. Throw that out the window, right? The talent now will set the path for how they want their career to develop. And so if you're going to invest in people and you're going to invest in teams, you have to be extremely flexible. And so you have the degree programs and you have hey, you could go to this group and then that group. But if you set it as, here is the path thou shalt follow, you can expect your talented people to leave. And so from a development perspective, I think we at least have had to be so much more in the mode of providing a menu. Here are all the different things that we can do for you. What would you like to do? And that requires deep management, deep leadership engagement with each individual, because each individual's journey is different.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think there's a couple of things. I think number one, I think authenticity always wins. And so if you're extemporaneous, but you're authentic, I think it's a lot easier personally. And it's a lot harder to kind of maintain a facade. I know I had a hard time maintaining being Marie. So if you can be authentic, it can really help. Every once in a while I was like slipping. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a gift shop owner. I had to like quickly remember that. So, but I do think authenticity matters. I think that people, especially more so today, it kind of cut through all the kind of the stuff out there, and the more authentic you can be, I think is better. I think it's just a better way to lead. I think it's better for the organization. They know where you stand, and they can be themselves, so they can be their best self. The second thing I would say is I'm a big believer, and one of the things I hire for is curiosity, because I believe that organizations that are curious, that always want to learn, you create an environment where you have a path, because everybody's a teacher, because everybody has something. Now, are there programs and are there discipline programs? Yes. But I think if you can create an environment where people feel comfortable that, hey, I don't know how maybe this gross margin is all the levers in gross margin. Hey, CFO, will you sit down and explain that to me? And she's willing to do that. Absolutely. You create this learning environment. So I think an organizational kind of value around curiosity, I think, is very important. And then the third thing I would say is for the individual that's wanting to grow. And I actually share this with a lot of the TCU students that I've engaged with, is that you have to take risks. You have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. I have never, any job that I have ever gotten, I was never fully qualified for it, but I had a willingness and a desire to learn. And I was fortunate that I had people that would support me in that learning process. And so I think, that becomes, the ability to take risks, the appropriate risks. I think that also in tune can help you on this journey.
I love it. Well, just like we've talked about, transformation of technology or business models or supply chains or any of these other kind of business topics that we teach a lot of here at the Neeley School. It sounds like what I'm hearing is that how one leads is in every bit as much of a transformation as any of those other areas. And so I want to say thanks to you both for bringing us into that insight and how you're thinking about turning that extemporaneous journey into sustainable organizational performance.
And if you could just take a minute to add one more thing, I would just also say that all of this learning that we've lived through in the pandemic, I actually think that those behaviors and the agility and how nimble and how people had the overused word pivot, honestly, those same behaviors are just as important right now. With all the other macro challenges that we're all dealing with, it's actually was almost a precursor for dealing with what's going on right now in our current economic environment. So I think it's just a nuance about maybe how the agility works, because we're having to move and change just as quickly today as we were even 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, it's an important new capacity. And you mentioned curiosity. I'm very curious to see what kind of questions we have from our participants. I think Tracy is back on. Yeah, bring us on the inside, Tracy. What are folks curious about?
We do. We have some great questions. The first one we have to both of you: what are you doing to address the Great Resignation and loss of staff?
I'll just speak briefly on what we're doing. We've really gone and embraced flexible work life. We literally just last week announced that we're a Northeast company. And so Flex Fridays, like summer Fridays, were always a big thing in the Northeast, because of people going to the shore and doing what they do in the Northeast. And so we've gone directly to Flex Fridays all year round. We've embraced this way of doing work. We've not been, we've figured out how to manage in this new environment, and we will continue to do so. It's a lot of it's been much more on the culture and the softer things, and giving people flexibility and giving them transparency to other opportunities, and being much more overt about other opportunities in our organizations. And then again, as I said earlier, pushing people into uncomfortable places and giving them the projects and taking more risks with others to give them those additional experiences has really been helpful for us.
Yeah, I'll key on two items. I mean, obviously we've been doing the basics that you would expect from regular compensation reviews, and we're having to sort of up our game on all that. But I would expect probably most of the folks on the call would expect that. We have done two things that touch a little bit on what Sharon covered. So we also have moved to a much more, we call it matrix work environment. And what we're focusing on is what we call on purpose for a purpose. And the concept is we ask people to come into the office for purposeful interactions. Mm-hmm. And a purposeful interaction can be a training session, it can be a coffee, it can be a one-on-one, it can be a happy hour. But for those purposeful interactions, we ask people to come into the office or to be together. If you don't have a purposeful interaction, do your job wherever you want. Right? Our offices are open if you'd like to come in. You don't have to. And the onus is on the individual managers to create the purposeful interactions that are right for their teams. And so I'll use two different examples. Our care centers, we moved all of our care employees, call center folks, we moved all that to home. These are well-trained folks. We have ungodly amounts of metrics to track how well they're doing. And so we really ask them to come in once a month, and we do sort of like a potluck dance party, like kind of let's get folks fired up and happy and get to see each other. And that's about it. My strategy and business development team, they're in the office 3 to 4 days a week because there is power in being together and whiteboarding and collaborating and kind of the ideas. The group is greater than the sum of its parts. And so the purposeful interaction structure that our care leader puts in place and the expectations on her team is completely different than the strategy and business development purposeful interaction model that leader's put in place. What that means is for me is I set no policy for the company. Right? The only policy I've set for the company is I expect managers to create purposeful interactions that are right for your team. And I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you that you're going to have the right number and you're going to strike the right balance. For me, for example, I ask my executive team, we have a staff meeting every Monday. And if you're in town, you don't have a customer to go visit, I ask that you be there for that. And then we do an ops review and what we call a special topics review in 2 consecutive days. And we have a dinner in between. And that's it. Right. So I'm asking my executive team to be in the office 5 to 6 days a month and maybe 1 dinner. And that feels really light. But in reality, those are all the purposeful interactions that I can justify. And so we've moved to that model. The team loves it because what we're avoiding is come in because it's Tuesday. And all you do is you sit in your office and you do the same Zoom calls that you could have done from home. Yeah. But because it's Tuesday, we want you in the office. And so that's been really helpful for us from an attrition and an engagement perspective.
Yeah, it's very, very, very similar. I think the purpose, being purposeful about why they're coming in is, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm going to be stealing that little phrase. Yeah, also have to remember that, in my situation for the CSC, which is, I think, a little bit near LT, I mean, some of my people have upwards to 1.5 to 2 hour commute sometimes. So, the fact that they got that kind of time back in their life was absolutely, huge for them. So that was another huge benefit. They're not having to worry about, gas, especially at, depending on where they live, $4 to $6 a gallon. So makes it just, again, it's kind of that balance. And we've also gotten, I think, a lot more. We've always been a pretty casual company, but we're great with the dog. We're great with, the doorbell rings. It happens to me. So I think it's that whole human. I go back to authenticity. Just be human.
The one other point I'll make, Tracy, before you go to the next question, that we also, and I would be lying if this had kind of permeated through all elements of the company, but I really view the Great Resignation as an opportunity. We have an incredible corporate culture. We're regularly among the top places to work. We're certainly the best telco to work. In any list you go look at, we're at the top of the list of telcos in terms of great places to work. And so I view this as an opportunity to upgrade our talent. Now, I hate losing people, but if I can lose someone and get someone better, well, that's a net benefit for the company. And so one of the things I am trying to get people to think about is constantly be recruiting. Right? Always be recruiting new talent. And so you cannot outsource that function to the HR and the talent management team. I am recruiting all the time. And I've recruited 2 store associates in my time here because I happened to be at a restaurant and the waiter was fantastic. And I said, hey, how much money do you make? And he said, well, I make this much. And I said, well, you can make a lot more if you come work for us. And so you've got to be constantly recruiting in this job. And so it is an opportunity to upgrade.
Great. Thank you, LT. So we have a few more minutes here. One of the last questions here was, you all have been great partners to Neeley and friends to the Neeley family. What would be the biggest takeaway for you and for leaders, a lot of us on the call, to continue their executive education? What would be the biggest, I guess, why is that important to continue, education?
So I'll go back to Sharon's point about hiring for curiosity. I I can train people on how to do a job. It's very difficult to train curiosity. It's very difficult to train initiative, and you can lose that over time. Right? One of the things I find is that, you know, when you're younger in your career, you innately have that desire to learn and that desire to expand and that desire to seek out new knowledge. And over time, you can run the risk of, you know, getting a little bit ossified, right? You know, I know that. And the stuff that I don't know if I want to know it. And continuing your education, whether it's formally via an executive MBA, or whether it's informally by seeking out mentors or by attending sessions like this. I try, as an example, and I try to build at least once a month into my calendar, participating in some session where I can listen to somebody from a completely different organization and an industry. And it's because it just keeps the mind flowing. It keeps you curious. It keeps you energized. And you have to be purposeful about it. Because if you're not purposeful about it, right, the momentum that occurs as your career develops is you're able to fall back on time-trusted techniques. That means that over time you say, you know what, I know how to do that. There's nothing new under the sun that I haven't seen. That's not true. And consequently, if you're not purposeful about continuing your education, formally or informally, you know, you run that risk. And so you lose that curiosity. And similar to Sharon, I'm hiring for curiosity. I'm not hiring for specific skill. And so if you haven't continued that education, well, then we ain't hiring you.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you are kind of stuck in a job or in a profession and you don't have the opportunity to expand your thinking, I think it can really impact your ability to continue to progress through your career, contribute to something you're doing in your community, whatever it is. I've always been a big believer that the more you know, the more you grow. And so if you continue to expand your thinking, meeting different people that have different perspectives, it makes you more well-rounded. And I've also been a big believer that even though I've been in the retail industry my entire career, but let me just tell you, I study profusely the transportation department because of the speed in which they get jobs done, and the manufacturing because of the way we can do work better. I really study the hospitality industry because they have some of the best loyalty programs and some of the best consumer experiences out there. So for me, I just really believe that if you continue to learn and grow, and you can continue to grow your mind and the way you think, I think an executive MBA program or MBA program, just continuous learning, is just a very, very important part if you want to continue to grow your career.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it back off to Kaylin to close us up for comments.
Thank you, Tracy. Sharon, LT, Daniel, we can't thank you enough for being here. I know that we as Horned Frogs feel so lucky to have you in our community and sharing your insights and obviously an experience about an amazing opportunity and the show that you guys were on. And just to our participants that joined us today, if you have kind of been inspired by anything that the leaders here have said and are interested in potentially looking into additional opportunities like executive education or the EMBA, obviously Tracy and I would be happy to assist with you. But please do keep an eye out for not only the recording of this session, but also for the schedule of upcoming Alumni Advantage Series events. I'd like to thank our sponsor again, Northern Trust, and we hope that you all have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend. Thank you for being here.
Bye, thanks.
Thanks. Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.